Are the Texas Longhorns the best team in the SEC? Better yet, are the Texas Longhorns the best team in the country? We discuss on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Longhorns, the show. Jonathan Davis, your host. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Stephen Ngadi from Fanatic Perspective joining me. It's been way too long. This is a two-part episode. Part one is Texas, the best team in college football, dropping today, of course. And then tomorrow, Thursday, part two, the Texas versus Georgia matchup. We preview that, all of that and more on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Steven checking in all the way from the Dominican Republic on the screen looking like money. What's going on, brother?
I'm doing well, man. I'm feeling good. Coming off a big win against OU. Celebrated right down here at my boy's wedding in the DR, but we're passionate. We're, like you said, Locked On Longhorns 24/7. We got this week coming back to Austin against Georgia. But like you said, it's really dope being able to cover the best team in college football, the Texas Longhorns.
All right, so you already said it. So I'm just going to go ahead and ask you and come out based on what you've seen. Is Texas the best team in the country, and what separates them from some of the other potentially elite teams in college football right now?
Right now, I think Texas has been the most consistent product week over week. All things adversity, because Texas has not been healthy, right? Clean wise. I mean, you've had quarterbacks miss time. We've had guys on the line miss time. We've had guys on defense miss time. It has not mattered in terms of the outcome and product on the field. You have a defense that's allowed 3 touchdowns halfway through the season. You have a team that started conference play, with multiple blowouts, right, where they've made their SEC opponent look like tune-up games. You've had a massive win up at Michigan. I understand Michigan's not what it was, especially offensively, but it's still a Michigan team that is projected to have as many as 4 guys go in the first round of the NFL in 2025 NFL draft. And you go up in there and you handle a team on a 42-game home regular season win streak, right? So as well as the defending national champions. Texas has been consistent on both sides of the ball, John. Where's the weakness that you've seen from Texas comparative to other teams? I think right now, Oregon probably has the best. Oregon and Alabama have the best overall wins if we want to go resume-wise, but they've clearly shown holes and been shaky, real shaky against some real questionable teams. Texas has not let off the gas against those type of teams. They have blown out everybody they've played. So I don't see how they can't be number one, especially considering the expectations coming into the season.
Yeah, you talk about Oregon, who struggled against, Boise State and Idaho. You talk about Alabama, who beat Georgia, but then lost to Vanderbilt and could have lost to South Carolina if South Carolina would have made some crucial plays down the stretch. And, you talk about Texas. They've taken care of business against everybody they've played. Now, how would you respond to the people that say Texas only looks like the best team in the country and they don't look like they have major flaws because they haven't played anybody yet? How would you respond to those critics?
Well, Texas has been consistent and even against the nobodies. Everybody else has been inconsistent against the nobodies. I mean, you just named off 2 of the teams. Now, Boise State is not a nobody. Let's also clarify that. But Idaho, right? I mean, if Texas has played Idaho, they're beating them by 3 or 4 touchdowns. These other games, Ohio State struggled. They didn't cover against Marshall, right? Like there's other games that we can go down the list. Penn State was bouncing around with Bowling Green at one point. So against the common opponents that we've all type of played, Texas has been by far the most dominant in terms of week over week over week. And we also don't have control over our schedule. I mean, it is what it is in terms of what we had coming into the season. No one thought Texas's schedule coming into the season was going to be some sort of cakewalk. I don't think anybody had that assumption. And we will learn a lot about this Texas team come this Saturday against Georgia.
Yeah, for sure. Moving into, some of the actual players, you play quarterback, so I know that position is near and dear to you. Obviously, we've seen two quarterbacks over the first 6 weeks light it up for the Texas Longhorns. A lot of pundits have said that Texas potentially may have two top 15 quarterbacks in the country. We know Quinn Ewers is in the top 15. There's no argument about that. But how do you feel about Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning? Would you agree with the statement that those are two top 15 quarterbacks on the roster in Austin, Texas?
I do. I think Arch is already there. How many teams right now would take their guy over Arch? Right? Like that's a question.
Not 15 teams. Not 15 teams. I can tell you that.
There you go, John. Not 15 teams. So when you look at what that means for the Texas quarterback room overall on a daily basis, that's a shared brain trust. You and I have talked on YouTube for years about Steve Sarkisian and his quarterback development system and program and what he's done even before Texas. I mean, come on now. This is one of the greatest examples we're seeing right before our eyes happening real time with Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning. And it's beautiful to see. You throw Trey Owens in there too at QB3, right? And then the kids coming in the coming years. It's exciting to watch. But they have right now solidified that they have the best quarterback situation in the country. I mean, Quinn Ewers didn't play for a month, was able to go in there, really have a lot of ring rust against OU, go through some things.
Thank the Lord it was OU, right? Like you said, it was a tune-up,
He had all the time in the world to figure himself out that game and still come back and have multiple touchdowns, and we win by 31 points, right? And it's still, but the good thing is Arch is playing so well that Quinn can't keep playing like that. And he knows that, right? And Quinn's going to ascend and get back to what he was, where we saw the guy against Michigan, who people bumped up to Heisman frontrunner, right? Those are first world problems that Texas is dealing with. So I couldn't be more pleased. Absolutely, Arch and Quinn Ewers form two top 15 quarterbacks. I would actually say two top 10 quarterbacks, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I don't think you're wrong. Just two exceptional talents at the University of Texas. When you look at both of these quarterbacks, because I know you judge quarterbacks a little bit differently than most, and you're looking at the nuances, the footwork, the time and the accuracy, everything. You're not just looking at the box score. I don't want to, pit two great quarterbacks against each other by any means. But when you look at Quinn Ewers and you look at Arch Manning, what are the biggest differences you're noticing between the two? Obviously, we've won games with both, right? But what are the biggest differences you're noticing between the two?
Arch is definitely pushing the ball down the field. There's no question about it. He is looking for the big play. I think he has one of his gifts, one of his X-Man abilities, as Rod Babers likes to call it, is the ability to those drop in the bucket throws, whether it's deep post, deep goes, deep crossers, especially with the speed that we have. I think he's timed up and synced up really well on a lot of those deep stuff. And then the biggest thing I would say that to the eye is the athleticism. Arch is a run. I mean, Arch can be a legit runner and a legit threat in the open field, as well as red zone on pulls, which he's already shown multiple times as he's played. Whereas Quinn scored on a keeper today. He has those abilities, but that's not a strength I would consider of Quinn's. Where Quinn is going to be very valuable, especially down the line, is the experience and ownership of the entire playbook and offense. Everything that we're trying to do and understanding the intention behind it, married with his X-Man ability, which is those intermediate dime throws, super tight window, how'd the ball get in there, the no look, the Matthew Stafford-ish type stuff that you see executed very well with the Los Angeles Rams under Sean McVay. That is what Steve Sarkisian is trying to mirror with him. And so they kind of run two different versions of the offense. I don't know if anybody else agrees with me on this when you see what they emphasize when they're in there. But I think Sark really likes to play to both of their strengths. What do you think, John?
No, I think that's a great point. Like you said, Quinn is certainly surgical in the short to intermediate. Really, has his timing down on those RPOs, the handoffs, and all the different things that Steve Sarkisian likes to do in the offense with the motion. Whereas with Arch Manning, it's just straight up fake the ball in the running back's chest and push it down the field. You know what I mean? So, like you said, we are seeing two different versions of the Steve Sarkisian offense with two different quarterbacks. And as you beautifully said, we have first world problems in Austin, Texas, right? Being able to switch up the offense and still go out there and blow out teams by, 20, 30 points, regardless of who you put in at quarterback. So great stuff thus far from Steven. We're going to get to the money real quick, a quick word from our sponsors, and then we're going to talk about a little bit more of this Texas football team. As Steven said, the best team in the country thus far. All right, today's episode of Locked On Longhorns brought to you by FanDuel, NFL and college football fans. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com. Bet on your favorite team today. All right, Steven, bringing you back in, and I want to talk about this running game, right? We know the Steve Sarkisian offense is all going to be predicated on the running game, regardless of what we have at quarterback, tight end, and wide receiver. And we're used to seeing elite in terms of running at the University of Texas, especially under Sark, Roschon Johnson, Bijan Robinson, Jonathan Brooks. I feel like this year the running game has been good, sometimes great, and he's been able to supplement it. I mean, when you get a 67-yard run from Arch Manning, when you get a 55-yard run from Ryan Wingo, you got multiple 25-yard touchdown runs from Isaiah Bond. You've been able to supplement the run game. But what have your thoughts been in terms of that facet of the offense thus far through the first 6 games?
Believe it or not, this is why they're one of the best teams in the country, because Doom hit them in camp, bro. In camp, they lost CJ Baxter. Think about where we left off last season, by the way, in the playoffs, even with the fumbles and everything after the Big 12 championship and everything.
Gashing Washington.
Everybody was excited about what? Jaden Blue and CJ Baxter. And you even heard a lot of pundits in the SEC. Is this the best running back duo in the conference? Is this, what Texas has, plus all those young freshmen they got coming in behind it? And I think that, to Sark's credit, to this team's credit, to everybody involved, especially Coach Tashard Choice, they have just gotten by without athleting the problem, honestly, because it hasn't been, like, to your point, a consistent guy every single week. We have had moments where Jared Gibson's look like he's just going to take off with it. We've had moments where Jaden Blues look healthy, right? And he's looked like the guy from last year. And then the guy that's been the most consistent, and I think you saw him in against the two biggest opponents thus far, Michigan and OU, Weisner starts to step up, and he's all of a sudden having this Le'Veon Bell type patience, watching the holes develop and going off for explosive runs. And I love that you added in the quarterback element, as well as Wingo, Golden, Bolden, all these other guys that they're using in combination with Flood and those guys up front to get the productivity in the run game. Texas doesn't have any stars. I don't know if they'll have 1,000-yard back or anything like that, but I think they've already proven that the run game is not going to be it's not going to get in their way in the big games, and it actually was an asset against a very good OU defense. One thing they love to talk about is how good their defense is, and look what Weisner did in particular once he got the timing figured out and where the cutback holes were. So I think we still have shown we have a really good group.
Yeah, I think, one aspect of the OU team they could have possibly argued was better than Texas coming into the game was the front seven. But then when you give up 9 yards of carry to Trey Weisner, that conversation goes out the window as well. Nothing you do is better than Texas at this point. When we gas you like that in the run game, it's funny because we saw Jaden Blue, right? Obviously, when Cedric Baxter went down, he had to step up. But then we saw some of those issues rear its head in the Mississippi State game. I mean, technically on 7 carries, but 2 fumbles on 6 recorded carries. One of them got called back for a penalty. And so then we saw him in the doghouse the rest of that game. And then it's not a huge difference, but in OU, and maybe it's just right in the high hand, but 17 total touches for Trey Weisner compared to 13 for Jaden Blue. Do you think that's going to be a theme moving forward? Do you think it's going to be based more on opponent? What do you think this kind of running back rotation, at least in the top two, looks like moving forward with Trey Weisner kind of getting that nod against Oklahoma?
I want to say this and kind of let our viewers in on a little inside stuff. Anybody that knows Tashard Choice, the one thing he values is ball security and understanding whatever your pass blocking assignment is when you're in there. He wants the room to be held like almost like an active service to the rest of the offense, not letting the quarterback get hurt and taking very, very good care of the football. When you saw Jared Gibson fumble earlier in the season, they did cut back his work a little bit before you got to earn that trust back. That is big with Tashard Choice. And that has been a big thing. He has challenged Jaden Blue with his entire Texas career. Now, did they go away from him or put him in the doghouse? Those splits to me sounded like a 1A, 1B, right? 17 to 13, that's not doghouse work. So they're not giving up on the kid. They're not saying you can't play here anymore, right? He's going to get more opportunities. Game flow will be a part of that, right? There's going to be some games where because of game flow, we're going to run the ball more because we jumped on somebody or whatever. There could be some opportunities where we're playing a team that's cheating their safeties up, and if Jaden Blue gets by the first level, he's gone. So yeah, we're going to probably gas him a little bit more. But the marriage of understanding and vision that Weisner is starting to show, I think is why he will continue to at least get at least half the work, because that is something that you just get there as a back. Jonathan Brooks got there, right, where he could understand when to slow down, when to hit the hole. I think right now with Jaden Blue, everything is still 100 miles an hour. That's why I call him Sonic.
Home run, right? Everything is still a home run, yeah.
Whereas you saw Weisner start, here's my hole, now I'm going to accelerate, right? So I trust them. I do trust them, but I think right now the work share is 1A, 1B, and I think that's what it should be.
Yeah, great point for sure. And one thing I noticed in a big way was his ability to let those blocks set up, really let that offensive line get out there, get in front, get on their man, and then you attack the hole, which he did a really good job against Oklahoma. Certainly the best game of his young career. Go ahead, Steve.
Let me ask you a quick question. Did you have in your playbook anywhere that Weisner would be in the conversation for RB1 before the season started, even with the injuries that happened?
No, I just thought that what Jaden Blue brought to the table was so different than Trey Weisner and, Jared Gibson. Now, I had questions on if Jaden Blue could touch the ball 20 to 25 times a game. So I knew Trey Weisner would be a big part of it, but I did not think that we would be 6 weeks into the season, even having a conversation of is Trey Weisner potentially running back one. I did not see that coming at all.
Kudos to him.
Yeah,
it's a testament to his development and playing big boy ball against Michigan and OU. Now we're here.
Yeah. Big time players make big time plays in big time games, certainly. I want to ask you about this wide receiver rotation. That's something that we've complained about for years at the University of Texas under Sark. Now, the first couple of years, we may not have a ton of wide receivers to go to, you know what I mean? So, but this year we coming in, we said we had 6 guys potentially that could make, plays at any given moment. And I think all 6 of those guys have had a signature game up until this point. Even Silas Bolden against OU, only 1 catch for 3 yards, but made a huge impact on that game with the fumble recovery for a touchdown and then a 55-yard punt return later in the game. How satisfied have you been, or what have you thought about the wide receiver rotation thus far from Sark this season?
They've done a fantastic job. Kudos to Chris Jackson and his especially with a room full of new guys, new faces, right? I mean, the DeAndre Moore was here last year. Jonte Cook was here last year. But for the most part, you're relying on guys like Isaiah Bond, Matthew Golden, Silas Bolden, as you mentioned, and then Ryan Wingo, who weren't all part of this football team last year. So their ability to be where they're supposed to be with playing so many guys and still having that continuity with both quarterbacks running, we've already kind of measured out there's 2 different offenses, and they're executing everything being thrown at them, in my opinion. I've seen them catch contested balls. I've seen them get yak, right? Catch off the run. I've seen them execute rub routes with each other. They seem selfless to me. I don't see anybody out here complaining about not getting the ball. I mean, everybody, like Matthew Golden has an argument that he should be getting more work, more targets. Ryan Wingo has an argument that he should be getting more work, more targets. They just seem to all be ready when called. Andre Moore, it almost seemingly looked like he got off to a slow start. And then when his buddy Arch got in there, he started getting fed. Right.
Huge game against Mississippi State, right? I was so happy for him, man, because he does the dirty work.
Absolutely.
For sure. Yeah.
He's a dirty work guy. He's our Jordan Whittington type that does team ball, team player. But it's also like this guy made an incredible catch in the Michigan game, just got called back for a penalty. He didn't get statistical credit for it, right? So we know what he's capable of. I think the competition has made everybody in that room better because if you screw up, they don't do, right? So if you have a bad drop or you run a wrong route or miscommunication with Arch or Quinn, there's brothers out here waiting to get reps that are amazing, right? So I've been so pleased. And here's the biggest misnomer that has happened. People look at Xavier Worthy, Adonai Mitchell and Whittington, and they say they can't believe that Texas is better offensively. And we're not saying that we're better because of the personnel we lost. It's more of a testament to how quickly the guys have come in and adapted, and the fact that we have more of them. We have more volume at this receiver room than we've ever had before. No one's saying that Isaiah Bond is better than Xavier Worthy. That's not the point, right? I think a lot of opposing fans look at our team and they're like, well, Texas can't be better than they were last year offensively. Well, the numbers say otherwise, right? The production on the field says otherwise because we have multiple guys in the room now that are ready to play and are high-level players. And Sark said it at the beginning of the year. I got 6 or 7 guys that I trust when I put them in the game that know the plays. So I'm going to play them.
Right. And I think having to defend all of those guys rather than, being able to key in on Xavier Worthy or Adonai Mitchell, especially in crunch time, has been a huge factor that a lot of people didn't expect for this Texas offense as a benefit. Quick word from our sponsors again, and then we get into the Texas defense, right? We haven't shown the defense enough love, but one of the elite units in college football. We talk about that next. All right, today's episode of Locked On Longhorns also brought to you by Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. All in price and one of the best features of the Game Time app. Toggling this feature shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Seat views, get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. The lowest price guarantee or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Game Time ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. All right, Stephen and Gotti back in from Fanatic Perspective, talking about this defense that's been elite by the eye test and statistically, right? Statistically, you're looking at a top 3 defense in the country, but obviously the low-hanging fruit or the argument is they haven't played anybody. They haven't played an offense with a pulse. And statistically, that may not be wrong, right? This is a defense that has not faced a top 70 offense this season. 71 Mississippi State is the best offense they've faced statistically. So what are your thoughts on this Texas defense? Are they elite? Do we need to wait and see what they do against Georgia? What's your thoughts on it? Have they not played anybody? What are your thoughts?
No, I think multiple things can be true at the same time. They haven't played a good offense. That's factual. I would say the best quarterback they've played is Michael Van Buren Jr., who was the Mississippi State quarterback that we got to see with no prep, no film of him because it was Blake Shapen. And we were actually more so prepping to play Chris Parson. And then they threw Van Buren out there, who was a dog, for those who don't know, out of St. Francis, Baltimore, home of one Angel Reese and many other great athletes. So he comes from a very prestigious school in Baltimore. And we got to feel the Van Buren experience out of nowhere. And I love the way we responded to it, by the way. versus how Georgia responded to Van Buren last week.
300 yards, tore him up.
That's a bad boy. So that's the best, but that's the best we face as a true freshman, right? So, no disrespect to Michael Hawkins, who's on the job learning, and the Michigan guys they're going through it too. So that's factual. But when you look at Anthony, what I hang my hat on with this Texas defense is eye test wise, they were a very good team last year. They returned I believe at least 7 starters from last year's team. Many of the guys after Jalen Ford, I've got like my next leading tacklers back. Anthony Hill was second. Michael Taft, like all these guys are back that did show up against other great teams in the past. So they have skins on the wall. Maybe not this season, but collectively as a group, I know Andrew Makuba can play ball against good teams, right? We just haven't seen him against a good team in a Texas uniform. So it doesn't mean that they're not elite. And everything that you look at of how they should be playing against these type of teams, John, they're doing everything they do against these type of teams, whether it's stopping the run, right? Now, we were never going to expect them to stop the run at the level of the T'Vondre Sweat and the Byron Murphy, but they're still doing an outstanding job. The pass rush has got over, especially throughout the season. And you have a secondary that's not giving up anything. And if you're playing bums, you shouldn't give up stuff. So, you know what? They get an A from me because they're not giving up stuff. You know what I mean?
And I said,
they're not playing down to the competition. They're not.
Right. And what I've said is what elite defenses do by any metric, regardless of who you play against, they turn the ball over. This is a defense that is forced to turn over in all 6 games they've played. And now you face the best quarterback by far that you played this season in Carson Beck. But, oh, yeah, he's turned the ball over 6 times in 6 games thus far. So there's opportunities there. Great stuff from Steven thus far, talking about the Texas Longhorns and what makes them the best team in the country offensively and defensively, just coaching development, everything we're seeing at the 40 acres. Part 2 next, talking about the Georgia Bulldogs, the Texas Longhorns, possibly the game of the year. Explosive stuff. Can't wait.